Thank you Ubisoft for giving me early access to Season 3. So, Ivory Tower has responded to hashtag FairPlayTCM, which I'm sure everyone is very familiar with at this point. And they've given us something called Direct Mode. Now, if I'm being honest, I never expected them to add something like this, and on top of that, they actually snuck in something else even more unexpected. But let's see if what they've done solves the issue though. Oh, and for reference, here are the assists that I'm using for Direct Mode. Alright, so let's go through the new steering settings. You can get to them by going to Options, Controls, Main Controls, scroll down to the steering subsection and you'll see Direct Mode, Sensitivity, and Dynamic Max Lock. Direct Mode removes the built-in steering filter and any other behind-the-scenes steering assistance. Keep in mind that this is for ground vehicles only, so boats and planes are not affected by this. The steering filter greatly slows down the turning speed of your wheels for most of your thumbstick's range of motion. When you get close to the max distance you can move your stick, then the wheels will start to turn much faster. This creates very slow and inconsistent steering, but you are able to make small steering adjustments without having to worry about losing control of the car. This is of course to simplify the driving for controllers. Direct Mode does away with all of that entirely and allows the wheels to turn one-to-one with your thumbstick. So if you move your stick 50% of the way, your car's wheels will also turn 50% of their max turning angle. This is true one-to-one steering, which at 50 steering linearity is way too sensitive and is honestly undrivable. You can see me here just sliding all over the place. So make sure your steering linearity is set to 100 whenever you're using Direct Mode. You can set it lower to 95 or 90 if that is comfortable to you, but I would honestly not go any lower than that. It gets way too crazy. Keeping your steering linearity higher will slow down your car's initial steering response, so you can make smaller adjustments to your steering without losing control of your car. I'll go more into detail with Direct Mode later on in the video. So I've seen a lot of confusion over how these next two sliders affect Direct Mode. Sensitivity and Dynamic Max Lock have no effect on Direct Mode whatsoever. These sliders only work for the built-in steering filter. In other words, Direct Mode has to be off. Just want to make that clear. Now let's take a look at them. So sensitivity, as you might guess, determines how responsive your car will be. So the lower you set the slider, the less responsive it'll be. Likewise, the higher you set it, the more responsive it'll be. Pretty self-explanatory. Now with Dynamic Max Lock, your steering gets more and more restricted the faster you go. So let's see it in action. In this clip, with Max Dynamic Lock set to 0, which is the most aggressive setting, you can see at lower speeds I can turn my car just fine, but as I get faster and faster, it gets harder to steer the car. Setting it to 100 removes the effects of Max Dynamic Lock entirely, and you can steer normally no matter how fast you're going. Whenever you're making changes to any of these settings, again, keep in mind your steering linearity. Setting this to 50 is perfectly linear, which will have no extra effect on your steering. Like I mentioned before with Direct Mode, setting it higher than 50 will slow down your initial turn-in response. Likewise, setting it lower than 50 will speed up your car's initial turn-in response. If you want your car to be more sensitive but not have to make that full jump to Direct Mode, I recommend lowering this. The sliders are cool, and in their defense, if you set both your sensitivity and Dynamic Max Lock to 100, you do actually end up with a more responsive car than what we had previously. The issue at this point though isn't sensitivity, it's precision and control, which is what Direct Mode provides, and that's why it's still the better option from a competitive standpoint anyway. Direct Mode isn't easy though, so I'll go over what you should know going into it. Okay, first tip. You need to get away from the all or nothing tap steering where you slam your thumbstick fully to the side every single time you want to turn your car. You will not be able to control your car driving like that. So what you should do is focus on moving your thumbstick in smaller increments and then hold it in the same spot once your car is turning at the angle that you want. You generally don't want to move your stick 100% to the side unless you're in a sharper corner or a gutter, as an example. Most of the time, you shouldn't even move it more than halfway. You have to consciously focus on it at first if you're not used to driving like this, but if you stick with it, it will eventually become second nature. Second tip, And this is probably the most important tip. Don't lose your nerve in the middle of a race. If you start panicking mid-race because you saw a certain player or someone is driving a bit weird in front of you, you're gonna spin out. Relax. Direct mode requires precision, and you can't be precise when you're freaking out. Take a deep breath and just play the game. I know some of you guys need to hear that. Alright, third tip. Do not fall into the trap of thinking extra responsiveness also means you have extra grip. That is not true. The limits of your car remain the same, and if you try to exceed those limits, and the game will let you exceed them, you will get punished for it. So let's take this high-speed turn for example. Simple, right? But the key here is that I'm not full locking my steering. I've got it about halfway and I hold it there. But if you try full locking here, you will scrub the tires and you're going to lose a lot of speed. In fact, you're going to lose so much speed that someone without direct mode is going to be traveling at a much faster pace than you. The steering filter protects you from this, but direct mode does not, so you have to manage this yourself. Again, precision. And it can get much worse than this depending on the car. Let's take the Bugatti Bolide as an example. If you try the same thing, you're not only going to slow down, but your car is going to lock up entirely, and you're going to drive off the track. All of the drift cars that existed in the game before the Hoonigan Season 2 update have the exact same issue. And there's probably more that I just haven't seen yet. So cars like the Hoonicorn are perfectly fine. That said, I don't really recommend using cars where this can happen. It's a bit too punishing if you make a small error. Number 4. Don't get carried away flicking your car. I talked about this in my original Wheelmode video that you can flick your car with one-to-one steering. All you have to do is move your thumbstick to the side really fast, and your car is going to enter a really deep power slide. It's a nice convenience, and it can come in handy when the situation calls for it, but it's not always faster. The reason why is because the longer you're sliding for, the more you're slowing down. So just use your best judgment with that. Okay, number 5, last tip. So don't overcompensate when you're driving over bumps. This is mainly a tip for off-road racing. So when your car starts bouncing and you're trying to make small steering corrections, just be careful not to steer too hard as you're landing, because your car is going to spin out otherwise. This makes off-road racing harder than with normal steering. So my best advice is to try to avoid making corrections at all. Anticipate where your car is going to end up and line your car up properly well in advance. That way you can kind of just drive straight with little need for adjusting your steering midway. So those are some general things to think about when you're using direct mode. When you're trying to learn it for the first time, I recommend starting with slower classes like Street 1 and Street 2. Racing and Alpha GP can work as well since the cars there are fast, but they have a good bit of grip. I've gone over direct mode, but where does wheel mode fit into all of this? Because it's still here, and direct mode is not wheel mode. You aren't emulating a wheel with direct mode. The cars with direct mode still feel like they have weight to them, and you can still lose control of the car very easily if you're not careful. With wheel mode, on the other hand, they feel like paperweights. No personality to their driving, and the back end of your car is pretty stable. Well, that's how it used to work anyway. So I'm recording this before they released the patch notes, so they may or may not mention it, but they did change how wheel input drives in this game. And if you're on a physical wheel, you're going to feel this change as well. So here's what wheel mode looks like as we know it today. You can wiggle the car back and forth really fast, and there's virtually no risk of losing control of the car. If you try doing the same thing in Season 3, however, you're going to notice the car doesn't behave the same. For starters, you're going to feel the weight of the car much more, so it's hard to wiggle back and forth really fast. Also, the back end of your car is not nearly as stable as it was before, so you're more prone to losing control of your car if you're not careful. And if we try the same thing with direct mode, you'll see it actually behaves very similarly to wheel mode in Season 3. So what does this mean? For starters, direct mode and wheel mode in Season 3 are both harder to use than the wheel mode in Season 2. They're both very similar in driving, but they don't feel exactly the same. Again, direct mode does not emulate wheel input. Cars on wheel mode feel a little bit more sensitive than on direct mode. The difference in how they feel though doesn't necessarily translate to one being faster than the other. So let's revisit a familiar part of the map. So in my wheel mode video, I use this section to show how normal steering has no shot against wheel mode. Now I'm going to show you that direct mode and wheel mode are comparable, if not exactly the same in pace. So wheel mode is on the left, direct mode is on the right. So I'm not sure if you guys can tell, but I was a little bit more shaky in the wheel mode clip because, like I mentioned before, it is a little bit more sensitive. But you could argue it's more sensitive to a fault because I didn't gain anything here with that. In fact, both clips actually finished at the exact same time, which was not planned because I didn't know how they would compare until I got around to editing them. Obviously, this doesn't represent every situation in a grand race or time trial, but my point in bringing all of this up is that when you're using direct mode, you don't have to worry about someone on PC using wheel mode being able to do something that you can't just as easily do. And to be honest, I don't even see a point in using wheel mode now. But anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Overall, I'm glad that Ivory Tower has responded to #FairPlayTCM so fast, and with changes that I think are a great first step forward. So let me know and let Ivory Tower know what you guys think of these changes, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.